Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight we're going to continue on with our study of the brain and its functions. So the next couple nights we'll be breaking it up into different areas, looking at these different areas. So what we'll be looking at tonight is the brain stem and the cerebellum. You might remember the cerebellum from our memory unit, and this coordinates the body. The limbic system, which we'll be looking at tomorrow night, manages emotions and connects thought to the body. And the cortex, which is this outer covering, integrates all this information and basically gives it meaning, and this is when we put it into action and figure out what to do with the information. So tonight we'll look at the brain stem. This consists of the pons and the medulla on this bottom portion of the brain stem. So the medulla, also called the medulla oblongata, controls most basic functions such as heartbeat, and breathing. So these are all these automatic processes, involuntary, that happen without our thinking of it. So breathing, heartbeat, our organs functions. So we know this because we found out that someone with total brain damage above the medulla, so in this part up here, could still breathe independently, but someone with damage in this area could not. So there was this famous actor, his name was Christopher Reeves. You may have heard of him. He was the star of the first couple Superman movies that were made in the 80s. And he had an accident where he fell off of his horse and severed his spinal cord, but he had extensive damage in the medulla, so he was unable to breathe on his own. If it was a little bit higher, he would have died completely, but it was right at the right spot where he was unable to breathe on his own, so he had a breathing apparatus for the remainder of his life. Now this pons area, this helps coordinate automatic and unconscious movements. So all these reflexive movements, instinctual movements, kind of regaining your balance, these things that we don't think about, these are coordinated by the pons, which is situated above the medulla. Now the thalamus, which is on top of both the pons and medulla, this is called, or we refer to this as like a sensory switchboard or a router, meaning that all the information that we get through our senses goes to the thalamus before it's distributed elsewhere. That's why we say it's a router. It figures out which route the information needs to take in order for the body to do something with it. So all these messages, except smell, it's important to remember, are routed through the thalamus on the way to the cortex. So as I said, the cortex figures out what to do with the information. So the thalamus also sends messages back from the cortex to the medulla and the cerebellum. So it's this mediator. It acts as a place where information goes before it's sent elsewhere. Now, in between the pons and the thalamus, we have this reticular formation, which is this little kind of net-like formation. So this is the nerve network in the brain stem. And it enables alertness from coma to wide awake, as demonstrated in these cat experiments. So they did some experiments on cats, which I don't necessarily agree with because I like cats. But they did this experiment where they hooked an electrode up to these reticular formations, stimulated them, and the cat woke up from a sleep. Although if you stimulated my brain when I was sleeping, I might wake up too, probably be very angry at you. However, this is what they did to those poor cats. They found out that these reticular formations filters incoming sensory information. So while we're sleeping, these reticular formations are still kind of awake and alert, and it alerts the rest of the brain if it's something important. So it filters all this sensory information. You can think of the net-like formation as sort of filtering things and taking things in with a net. Now the cerebellum, you might remember this from our memory unit. It helps, not only does it have to do with memory, but it also helps coordinate voluntary movement, such as playing a sport. Now, this has to do with the opposite of what we just talked about, because these movements are conscious. So when you're thinking of what to do and you do it, that's your cerebellum. So anybody that's involved with sports, you're having to think on your feet all the time, your cerebellum is very active. So the cerebellum has many other functions, including enabling non-verbal learning and memory. So the cerebellum is very important. We are going to continue studying it throughout the year. Alright, so that is all for this evening. Stay tuned for more, folks. Have a good one.